If you want to read better and think more clearly and understand the ideas shaping our world, then this might be for you. You should join the Dr. John Patrick Book Club. It's a private online community where we read great books together and learn how to think, not just what to think. Inside, you're going to have access to Dr. John Patrick as we work through books and ask questions. If you've ever felt like there are books you should be reading or ideas that you want to understand better, but you didn't want to do it alone, this is a good place to start. You can find the link in the show notes or the description below to join.
Hello. It's nice to be doing this again. I hope you'll find it enjoyable too. At my age, the fact that you can still be useful is quite exciting. When I finish this, I'm off to Edmonton to do 2 or 3 lectures with medical students, doctors, and some philosophers too. So that should be interesting. I'm away for a week. But I've been thinking quite a lot recently about developments. I mean, obviously, we've had a long involvement with Africa and the Caribbean and watched the processes go on and watched billions of dollars wasted in aid. I mean, just to take an example that seems to me patently obvious, but not to the powers that be that are so enamored of their own ideas that they can't look practically at things. One of the best things that could have been done for Africa and hasn't been done is to build some modern, efficient, carbon-powered, coal-powered fire station, electricity generating stations. That would make their lives different and possible in many different ways. But that has not been done. The green mindset is so blind to anything else that it doesn't think clearly at all. South Africa is a good example. And when Mandela and the ANC took over, South Africa was functionally a European nation. It had railways, roads, education, hospitals, and it generated enough power to export to the countries to the north of them. Now, today, they have brownouts all over the place. The railway system doesn't work anymore. The roads are still there. The education system has been taken over by woke nonsense in many places. And the corruption of the ANC is not even denied by most people now. That's a very sad outcome. There was so much hope at the beginning. The Rainbow Nation, that in itself was enough to ignite some doubts. But where we've got to in South Africa now is extraordinary. It really looks as though some unbelievable things might happen in the next election, like electing an Afrikaner president. That would be amazing, but it's not beyond the realm of possibility, because ordinary Africans, those that have been around long enough, they're not stupid. They know that when the ANC took over, the health clinics worked. They had one of the best local primary care systems in the world. Good doctors were available. The education system produced some of the best doctors in the world, for instance. I was always impressed with what I met along the way. Good, well-intentioned people, by and large. The writing was on the wall in some respects, because the first time we went to South Africa was after spending most of a year in what was then Zaire, before that the Belgian Congo, and now the non-democratic Democratic Republic of Congo. And there, of course, this was the late 80s, the new disease was HIV. And so I had seen quite a lot of it. when I got to South Africa for a teaching session, I went to most of the academic pediatric departments of pediatrics in South Africa during that trip. But one of the most interesting moments was going to teach at Baragwanath Hospital in Soweto. And my interest and academic expertise was severe malnutrition, so that was the subject. But at the end of the lecture, a doctor in the audience said, "You've been in Zaire for the last year, so you must have seen this new disease." And I said, "Yes, I've seen more than enough of it." He said, "We have just had our first case in Baragwanath Hospital. Do you have anything to say that might be helpful to us?" That was a politically dangerous question, but I decided just to be as truthful as I could. I said, "Well, it's a serious disease, very serious disease. But further north, the fatalism of the African community, which comes from their religious understanding of the world, doesn't fit well with public health approaches. Condoms are going to be pushed because they've got nothing else to offer, but they won't work. Anybody who can multiply two probabilities knows they won't work. The probability of a condom failing is not small, it's real under ideal circumstances. Under the circumstances that sex takes place, who knows what the situation will be in Africa, but it will be like playing Russian roulette with more than one bullet in the chamber. The only wise advice would be, this is extremely dangerous. It is transmitted by sexual contact. The only honest statement I can make to you, if you wish to avoid it completely, is chastity before marriage and fidelity afterwards by both of you, and be tested first. But I know that that's not going to be acceptable, but you should note it that is the only safe way forward at the moment. Now, in due course, we got treatment, which has helped a lot to mitigate the disease, but it continues. At that point, a young doctor just qualified was writing death certificates for people his own age. Well, it took 2 or 3 years to come up to that level. So I was back again a few years later. I mean, in fact, a few years later, I was in Bloemfontein for Christmas, and the doctor I was staying with said, "Would you do rounds with me? I'd like you to meet the residents, pediatric ward." So I went on to see what was going on. And the first ward we went to, there was a child with HIV brought in by grandmother, or was it great-grandmother? Anyway, yes, it must be great-grandmother. Grandmother had died, mother was sick, and great-grandmother brought the baby in. That, from zero to that kind of thing, just in ordinary pediatrics happening all the while. Madunza, a dominantly black medical school, a significant proportion of the medical students were HIV positive, so there was considerable discussion. Under these circumstances, should we allow discrimination against HIV positive people becoming doctors on the grounds that everybody else needs doctors who give us 40 years of service and they won't? Not easy questions to answer. Denial was common enough, and the consequences are all well known. I mean, South Africa's population growth has ceased, as has most of Africa's, because of this disease. But we've also watched over time, and over the last little while, it's been interesting to me, I had become interested in what a biblical approach to development would look like, because what I had discovered in Zaire was that I could train people to do proper resuscitation of malnourished children and train them to identify it early when it's easy. But within a year, one of the nurses that I had trained had his own child die of malnutrition. That was beyond belief. But it was perfectly rational, because he may have nominally called himself a Christian, but the way that they understand the reality of life in that part of the world, in fact, throughout most of Africa, is by reference to evil spirits, which are also found in the Bible, so not difficult. But evil spirits are unpredictable. And disease and harvest failure and other disasters are unpredictable. So they revert to an animistic understanding. So when his child got sick, he went to the witch doctor, who said, "Oh, yes, he's got an evil spirit. Let me deal with that." And he took his money and the child died. Now, one shouldn't laugh at that, because that way of understanding the world makes it possible to continue living but it doesn't make it possible to change, to develop. And that's where our problem rises. I had, as it happened at that time, started thinking about Deuteronomy. And yesterday, we're getting old, so my wife is constantly on my case to clear up. And I was tidying up to some degree another desk, and I came across a notebook. And I opened it. It said 1993, the Decalogue. This would be 4 or so years after I'd started talking about it in Africa. But I'd been forced to think about it more seriously. So I wrote there, this has been this fall's main study. I certainly understand it differently now, but much remains obscure. It's astonishing. I can read my writing from 1973, but not from yesterday. I don't enjoy this aspect of getting old. An early exit has its appeal, not to Christians, of course. God knows what he's doing, but it's not enjoyable, I tell you, not being able to read your own writing. In the story of the Jews, the Exodus is critically important. A rabble of slaves plucked by God's hands out of Egypt. They can have had little or no idea what was happening to them, and certainly they didn't appreciate all of it at the time. The desert experience seems to have been primarily one disaster after another. At the level of their choices, they made very bad ones. There's no affirmation of them, no positive psychology from God. He's very clear about the things they've done wrong. Sinai was a psychological disaster at one level. They had the experience of God and were terrified. The promises they made were immediately broken. A good many of them died with or because of what choices they had made. All their families were touched by emotional pain, yet God continues to say that their problem is that they do not fear him sufficiently. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. It's just a sort of platitude. But this last Christmas, reading Isaiah and realizing that prophesying the coming of Christ and the incarnation, he said, he will delight in the fear of the Lord. What is he saying? Well, he's saying he wants to delight in reality because he knows what the ultimate reality is, and the current one is not as good, and we're always trying to make it look better than it is. There was a recent article in First Things looking at the presidents during as they come to their anniversary, and it's not a happy account in terms of outcomes. Billions of dollars are wasted on schemes that shouldn't have happened in the first place. Corruption is real in America too, not on the same scale yet as the ANC, which everybody now accepts in South Africa, that they are disastrously corrupt. But Zuma defended the corruption. He said, look, I'm the chief. Zulu chiefs take what they want and support the people by defending them. That's what I've done. He built himself an estate on money he'd taken from the state and did not feel guilty about it. Third, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. We need legitimate fear now in medicine. You get the legitimate fear pretty quickly when you graduate. You realize how dependent you are on the people around you to do a half-decent job. You've got a lot to learn. I mean, you learn far more in your first year as a practicing intern than you learnt in the previous 4 or 5 years, most of which, especially now that the whole program has become a memorize and dump program, it doesn't work for them. The Jews had to come to terms with the fact that they had heard the law, said they would do it, and then didn't. And here's the line that I think every Christian family should make sure that their children understand, and non-Christian too, certainly Jewish as well. But in Deuteronomy 4, Moses says, God heard what you said when you said you would obey his laws. But he also said, oh, not a happy oh. Oh, that they would have such a heart and mind as this to keep my law, that it might go well with them and their children forever. The fear of the Lord is diminishing in the Western world. I grew up in a family and in a place where the fear of the Lord was tacit knowledge. Mothers would very vigorously scold and indeed punish children who swore. You didn't hear a lot of swearing. You didn't hear a lot of filthy language. I mean, they were there. They always have been. But not like they are now. It's as though the modern youth have no adjectives or adverbs. They just simply put the F word everywhere. This is a diminished society. So God says that they might keep my law, that it might go well with them and their children forever. That's what he wanted. When he taught them the law, or when Moses talks about the law to them, he says, look, God didn't explain why. He just simply said, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt. You all know that's true, that you are now a different people than you were before, and you're in a process of change. He doesn't explain. He just simply says, because I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, this is what you must do. And then he writes down the 10 divine intolerances. That's what they are, isn't it? Behaviors that God says, I will not tolerate these. If you break these laws, there will be consequences. You will lose your way. He even tells them, you will lose your kingdom, your land at some point. But there is a covenant between us. You will come back. And the story of the Jews is extraordinary. The hatred of the Jews is pure resentment, I think. They have no right to exist because they've overcome difficulties the like of which no other group has ever encountered without being wiped out in the process. They have done it. And now, I mean, they're one of the most inventive and productive nations on earth. They're astonishing in what they get done. They write most of the difficult software. They modify American planes to make them better, and so on and so forth. And yet they don't believe. The vast majority of them don't practice their faith. But their Judaism has made them because of the covenant. And we need to learn from them. I wish they had taught us. And what we have to learn is the role of parenting and what it has, what impact it has on the child's development. Nobody who's thoughtful denies that the American problem of black crime on black. I mean, the biggest risk of black kids being murdered in the ghettos of America is not from policemen. It is from other black kids. It's a real problem. Denzel Washington, look, he says, a boy needs a father. Johnson's cynical, giving money to young women who got pregnant and the man wasn't around, but not to young couples who got pregnant in order to make a new American. They didn't get anything. Johnson understood that if he could make a significant proportion of the population dependent upon the government, the Democratic government, they couldn't be pushed out of power. Well, it didn't work out the way he said, but it was a cynical thing to do, and they are paying the price. Absentee fathers. As Denzel Washington goes on to say, a boy must have a male role model. If he can't find one in his home, he will go on the streets and find one, and we all know what that means. It's a major problem. It's a major problem throughout the world where no other religion does it the way that the Jews do. Makes it, write it on your hands, what you do. Write it on your head, what you think. Write it on your heart, what you feel in the depths of your being. The law, the stories of history that account for what has happened. It's not an accident that experimental science only developed in Western Europe, beginning somewhere around the late 13th century. I've talked about that in other places if you want to follow it up, but I have no doubt that it is fundamentally deeply rooted in Christianity, Judeo-Christian thought, modified by Greek and implemented by Greek philosophy. But the Greek philosophy on its own never produced experimental science. Aristotle didn't trust inductive reasoning. He would do deductive. But the deductive approach, we're not smart enough. We set out to get to answer, starting with God and working our way down through all the details. We get lost on the way every time. But because there is a God, and he is a God who is good and rational, we can look at things that are small, like rolling a ball down an inclined plane and changing the angle and measuring what happens. We can do that even as an act of worship, and that, of course, has worked. I mean, there are many philosophers of science who want to run away from inductive thinking because they hate it, because they understand what it means. You need morality to do science, especially now when so much money is on the line, and the morality is dying fast, and so is the science. We have no idea how much of it is now produced in the at the desk and not at the bench. And the vast majority of published papers are not repeated. The new head of NIH, Jay Bhattacharya, is trying to come up with ways to fund young people to repeat experiments that appear to be important and see if they can do them. We know that the answer will be that they can't. The John Darcy affair made that very clear many years ago, but nothing was done to work out what goes on. The moral commitments are essential. Without them, we will fall apart. We're corrupt too, much more than we used to be. I mean, my first homeroom master in American terms, was a man who spoke 5 languages and only had a bicycle, but he loved us and he loved teaching us. 2 loves. The Faculty of Education is useless because it doesn't recognize that you cannot teach teachers. You teach methodologies that give us what we've got now. I will be talking to students this coming week, and I will ask the following question, and I know what the answer will be, and I want them to think about it. And the question is, could you pass the exam for which you got an A 5 weeks ago? Now, could you sit down and do better now? Now, Socrates and his like, and his ilk, would say, well, of course I can. I've learned more things since then. Great scientists would have said the same thing, but they were not fed what some distant bureaucratic mind had said, well, obviously biochemistry is essential to the human body, so doctors must know about it. The real fact of the matter is they know virtually no biochemistry, and the biochemistry they need to know is extremely obscure in most cases. They practice medicine on so-called evidence-based medicine, which means that somebody with a big name and lots of publications has said it in an important journal. That's not evidence, that's authority. It always has been authority. It always will be authority. You can ask in any city or any hospital in North America or Europe, if I took a list of all the surgeons and physicians in this town, and I asked you, who are the best ones? Would I get a random scattering of names? No. No. Because the doctors know who's good at their job. He may not be very good at his bedside manner, may not be making lots of money, but he does a good job and he enjoys doing it. But that is changing. We have a problem. So I never expected to see what I'm going to tell you next in my lifetime. But there's a man called Frank Zanu, I think he was born in Benin and spent some time in Ghana and then came to America and is really Americanized now. And he likes asking questions. But he's got a project, the Zanu project. And he's in South Africa quite a lot, and I was listening to what he has to say. He is so blunt. He says this, and imagine a white person saying this to a black audience. He said, when the so-called colonizers, the whites, arrived in the Cape, there were no roads, there were no railways, there was no education system, there was no health system. They built it all. There was no power, no electricity. Initially, Cape Town was just a stopping off point going around the Cape of Good Hope. But they settled and they spread, and they ran incredibly efficient farms, built up over generations. Now, some of those farms have been stolen. Now, much of South Africa is arid. Managing a farm is very difficult under those circumstances. And I saw some figures not long ago for the a good percentage of the farms that have been taken over without recompense are now non-functional because the skills to do it have not been acquired. Now, he says, look, you've got to face that. It's not that blacks are less intelligent than whites. No. Now, he hasn't gone down this road as far as I hope he will go. I mean, what made a difference to us was the gift of a narrative of meaning. And what's happening with Jordan Peterson at the moment, or has over the last few years, he focused on meaning, and young men in particular almost worship him for what he has done to their lives. I met him on one occasion and asked him about it. He said, it's very deeply moving to be recognized on the streets by young men who come up and say, "You're Jordan Peterson, aren't you?" And he said, I say, "Yes." And then they say, "May I shake your hand? You've reconciled my father and myself. You've given me hope." That's astonishing. There is hope. I mean, there's clearly a growing awareness that we can't go on the way we are. I mean, the wars that are going on at the moment, the billions of dollars that are wasted on rockets and goodness knows where else. But we are where we are. And the church, of course, is largely sound asleep. A good many just go for some sort of comfort, not very regularly. I mean, as a physician, you see it. At the end of their lives, people do think about God in most cases. Now, the Catholics say, well, the priest just looked after that, the ordinary ones. I used to go to Mass a few times a year, some years. That's a common phenomenon. At the other end of the spectrum, evangelicals don't show a stunning awareness of death in the way that was true at the beginning of the evangelical revival in the 18th century. John Wesley, when he was asked by people, "Oh, this is all emotional claptrap, isn't it?" He'd say, "Come and watch our people die." And that you can still see. People who are transformed at death, who have lived good lives, that's okay, but who believe there is a life to come. And in their passing, they show evidence of the reality they're going before. And near-death experiences are doing the same thing as well, having they come back with similar stories, having floated out of their body and watching them in the OR trying to recover, and sometimes it could be hours. The stories are astonishing. If this bit of what I'm saying is getting to you a little bit, just go and read A Window on Heaven, Diane Komp, K-O-M-P, published by HarperCollins. She's written 2 or 3 books, but when you've read 2, HarperCollins, the third one is a mishmash with a couple of extra stories. So, but they give an account of how children that she was caring for, having lost her evangelical faith in university, how those children brought her back to faith because of what she witnessed. Children who saw Christ before they left. "Mummy, can you see the angels? Can you hear their singing? It's beautiful." And she was gone. That reality has to come back. There's no passion in the church because we've sort of dumbed it down to make it more comfortable. You don't go to church to feel good, or at least you shouldn't. You go to church to be reminded of your problems, to reminded that God knows everything. "O Lord, unto whom all hearts are open, all desires known, from whom no secrets are hid." Cleanse the thoughts of our hearts, because none of us can keep our hearts clean, can we? None of us could walk around with a bubble over our head. We're still having a battle in our minds every day. Hopefully progress is made, and certainly repentance is available and should be used. Go and do that. Have a good week.